Hey, everybody. Welcome back to our talk on remote team leadership. We're going to be drilling down today on one of the critical success factors of remote team management, and that is conflict resolution. Conflict resolution is one of the most important things that you can master as a remote team leader. Conflict resolution and decision-making and controversy in themselves are difficult in normal circumstances, much less in the situation we find ourselves in where most people are now leading by remote team. And so as a leader, we need to create a framework and a set of guidelines in which our teams will operate in, just so that they can have some stability. And stability in the workplace is critical right now, and in general for remote teams, it's critical. So our agenda for today is to, we'll recap my introduction a little bit, and then we're going to go through conflict and controversy, resolving conflict, conflict resolution tools, and some pitfalls to avoid. So speaking in regards to my experience in remote team management, I've been working on remote teams for 20 plus years, and I've either been on them or leading them, and we've been doing so, or I have been doing so successfully, meaning that I've been able to lead my teams to being number one or number two in the particular discipline or division in which I've worked. And that nothing great happens without a team, so that all I did was facilitate the work as a leader. And I do believe in transformational and servant-based leadership and equipping your employees so that they can be empowered to do what they need to do and get their work done. And they did that. And so any great leader will tell you that it really is their team that is the reason why they are successful. The leader's job is to inspire and guide and lead that team so that into success. So I have combined that experience with the education that I've gotten during my doctoral program in creative leadership for innovation and change. And we're just going to be sharing some techniques and strategies on how to manage conflict and the importance of it is, and frankly, how to use it to build your team. Conflict and controversy. Here's what John Stuart Mill said about it. Conflict and controversy is not, isn't anything new. It's been around since the beginning of mankind. But when you talk about organizational structure and using it for business and in teams, Mr. Mill said this: since the general or prevailing opinion of any subject is rarely or never the whole truth, it is only by collision of adverse opinion that the remainder of the truth has any chance of being supplied. So conflict and controversy are actually key in decision-making and good decision-making policy. Matter of fact, just a forenote is that when you discuss decision-making, the least effective way of making a decision is by an individual leader. It has been statistically proven that decisions that are made solely by the leader are the least effective decisions when it comes to guiding a team or in organizational life. The most effective is decision by consensus or by committee. That committee or that team makes a decision that requires them to go through a process of controversy and conflict. It's called decision making. But how we handle controversy and conflict is critical in being able to make sound decisions. And that's what we want to talk about, because the higher quality a leader's decisions are, higher quality that a team's decisions are, the better that team is going to function and the better success and the outcome, the business outcomes are going to be far better. So controversy. What is controversy? It's the conflict that actually arises when one person's ideas, information, their conclusions, theories, or their opinions are just simply incompatible with those of another person. And you've got to have the and. The two parties or multiple parties seek to reach an agreement. Without those two parts, you don't have the required makings of a sound or a good decision-making process. You've got to have the conflict, but you also have to have team members that have the attitude that they want to come together and seek an agreement. If those two things are in place, then you can go on and make good decisions, and as a team, get past the storming stage of team creation so that you can go on and norm and perform. Matter of fact, that actually brings us to a little bit of a review. And from our first presentation, we learned that teams go through 4 stages of life, or 4 stages of existence. The forming stage, that's at the top, when you're forming, assigning roles, who's going to be on what seat of the bus, who's going to be on the team, et cetera, et cetera. The next stage is storming. And most teams don't make it past the storming stage because they don't understand, or at least their leader possibly doesn't understand or hasn't done a good job of teaching them or coaching them through conflict and teaching them conflict resolution skills. If a team can get past that storming stage, they can then go on to the norming stage of understanding how to make great decisions, how to work together as a team, how to flow together as a team, and that results in the performing stage. And hopefully, if you've done everything very well and at a high level, they become a high-performing team. But you have to have those 4 stages, and conflict and controversy and decision-making are some of the things that happen, and you have to learn, and your team has to get used to doing it during the storming stage. So, unresolved conflict. What's it look like? What it looks like is a flat tire. That's what it looks like. It looks like a tire that's been buried in the mud, and you can't get out, and you're stuck. And that's what happens to a lot of teams. They get into the storming stage, and what happens is that conflict arises because 2 or more people on the team can't come to a solid conclusion on what direction they should do, or even if you have a sub-team, as a leader and your managers have come to a conclusion and a direction in which team should be doing what, then the sub-teams underneath those managers or your team leads, right, they don't agree what to do. And they're just not in an alignment. There's no cohesion there. And unresolved conflict fuels that negative fire. Now, what I find funny though is that thinking of it like a flat tire, yeah, it gets you stuck, right? But it doesn't take a genius to actually fix a flat tire. What it does is it takes effort. Left alone, it's going to drain your energy, and like we said, you'll get stuck in a rut. But the good news is it doesn't take a genius to fix it, but it does take effort. It does take some work. And we want to talk about that. Resolved conflict creates team energy. If you take a look at that first picture of the team changing out the tires on the Indy car, what does that picture represent? What does it make you think? To me, it makes me think of a well-oiled machine, a team that works together, a team that works smooth. They all know their role. They have a part to play. If you've ever seen an Indy race and watched that team live, they're just like, it's like a beehive and people running everywhere, but everybody knows exactly what they're supposed to do because they've all made a decision on how the tire changing and fueling the car and whatnot is going to happen. So before that, however, they went through some conflict and controversy to decide how they were going to do those things and to come up with that plan. So conflict and controversy, in particular, if it's resolved, becomes a great source of energy for pushing the team forward. It creates team cohesion. It makes us increase our communication and increase our communication skills. It uncovers areas in which we need to improve our communication skills, and then hopefully being proactive. And as a leader, we coach our team into better communication skills. It fosters collaboration. It enables, you can't resolve conflict unless you're talking and collaborating with the rest of the team. It enables better decision making, and bottom line is it helps build high performance teams. Without conflict resolution, you will not have a long-term, long-lasting high performance team. You might have a flash of the pan success, but without being able to resolve conflict, your team's going to struggle at some point. So here's a picture of a pit crew, and as you can see, it very much looks like a honeybee, a set of honeybees buzzing around the car. But again, it's chaos in order. And as a leader, we're responsible to take the chaos that comes with teams and the additional chaos that comes with managing and leading remote teams and turn that into something that's purposeful, meaningful, effective, efficient, and profitable. And so to do this, we need to understand some procedures on how to resolve or how to work through conflict and controversy and do good or have better decision-making skills. Some ways that we solve conflict and controversy are through creative problem solving. We're going to discuss that quite a bit today. It comes through deliberate and purposeful discussion. It doesn't just happen by chance. Remote team leaders must be proactive. This is not something that you can just sweep under the rug. You can't hope the conflict goes away, and certainly you can't know that it's there and ignore it. If you're the type of person that tends to be an ostrich that likes to put their head in the sand when trouble comes around, that trouble will get you. You cannot put your head in the sand when it comes to resolving conflict. And I'll share a book with you. Matter of fact, this is probably a good time. If you're the type of person who shies away from conflict, and many of us do, there's a great book. It's one of the ones that I use when I teach my graduate or undergraduate level negotiating and persuasive speech class. It's called Crucial Confrontations. I have had every one of my team members read it in the past, at least those that I felt didn't understand how to confront situations in a positive, proactive, and constructive way. And again, it's from the same book that actually Wharton Business School uses, which is where I got it. When I took my graduate level class, it's the book that they used from Wharton Business School to teach negotiation, the beginnings of negotiation. And again, it's called Crucial Confrontations. You can go to Amazon, look it up, and get it. Remote team leaders have to be able to control the chaos. And when you talk about chaos, there's something that are called bifurcation points. It's a big word that means there are forks in the road. What a bifurcation point is, if you can think of maybe two birds or bees flying around and they come to the point where they're going to crash. Those two bees or the two workers, like in our picture, are going to collide. They have a choice to go left, right, up, down, or make changes in what they're doing. And those bifurcation points are the things that decide whether or not you are going to be a successful leader or whether or not your team is going to be successful. And we're going to discuss how to control some of those bifurcation moments in regard to whether or not your conflict is resolved, whether it's resolved positively, negatively, or other. So if we choose the right bifurcation points, the outcomes that we can expect from controversy and conflict is to have a productive team, a more creative team, a team that is fully involved. Every member on the team is involved in doing their tasks. Interpersonal interaction and attraction is taking place. And I'd like to take a moment just to explain this one real quick to you. If you've ever read the book or the series, Chicken Soup for the Soul, humans have this innate ability to connect during conflict or because of conflict. So what happens is that when we go through a difficult, trying, stressful process, this is why the Army trains their people the way they do in boot camp. Boot camp is incredibly stressful. And the higher you go, Army Ranger, Navy SEAL, whatever that level might be, that training is even more difficult, because when you're going through the difficulty of those processes, what happens is that there becomes a psychological interpersonal attraction between team members. And the team members that make it through begin to be attracted towards one another, not in a physical or sexual fashion, but in a fashion that supports one another, just like we're seeing in this crisis today. How many organizations and how many people, how many moms, how many teenagers are sewing masks? How many are converting over their factories to create breathing apparatus, machines that they use in the hospital, respirators? We're seeing that strangers are coming together and having bonds built that wouldn't have been there prior. And that's why that Chicken Soup for the Soul series, one of the reasons why it did so well, because it's a story about human camaraderie. And that's what happens when your team goes through the storming stage. And that's why if you make it through that stage, you can go on to norm and perform. And that part right there leads to the psychological health part of making it through controversy and conflict. Dealing with conflict in decision-making and controversy is actually a healthy psychological process that all humans must and need to go through. Without it, we come out with things like people being lethargic, depressed, disengaged. Matter of fact, conflict resolution is one of the reasons, or unresolved conflict is one of the reasons why so many workers in the United States are disengaged. Prior to the whole COVID breakout, the United States, according to the United States Labor Bureau, the United States is spending approximately $600 to $630 billion paying disengaged employees. And so as leaders, we want to make sure that we're teaching our people and our teams how to resolve conflicts and how to make good team decisions through consensus, so that we re-engage or mitigate the risk of our teammates becoming disengaged. So controlling some of that conflict and controlling the chaos, there are some tools. First, you need a framework to work from. Second, there are formal and informal processes just based on how important the situation is or the decision that needs to be made. Leadership and team member orientation towards creativity and towards creative problem solving. We're going to talk about that. I'm going to share a tool with you. Also, in your creative problem conflict resolution skill set, we're going to talk about what are called 4 frameworks of leadership orientation that will help you take a look at yourself and find out where you're at and where you're oriented in regard to conflict resolution, so you can see where you're strong, and then the other 3 areas where you might need to bolster it a little bit. I did. Most of us are strong in 1 or 2 areas, but 1 or 2 areas of that framework, which we'll discuss, we're not as strong on it. We need to bolster that and become a well-rounded leader. And finally, we're going to talk about creative thinking characteristics. And that is, there are 5 typically different ways, or 4 ways that all humans think creatively. And what we do is there is another assessment you can give your team, and you take yourself. I've taken it, and I recommend all people take it. That will help identify who you have on your team and what seat they need to be in the conflict resolution process. So the first thing we wanted to take a look at is that resolution process framework. First off, when you have a conflict, you're going to ask yourself and you're going to ask your teammates or those that you lead to organize the information that they have researched and that they've made conclusions from. And you want them to write down those conclusions, and you want them to cite the resources as to why they came to those conclusions. This is called due diligence. It's the assessment part of any situation, and you've got to start there. What is it that has caused a person or caused you to come to the conclusion that you have? And what are you backing that up with? The second thing is that once you've done that, and in a remote meeting, you're probably going to be having everyone take turns. And this is where the next step is where the gatekeeper comes in. We talked about a gatekeeper and that role for your team meeting, that the gatekeeper is the person who makes sure that everyone has a turn to speak and that everyone is participating. So during this part of the meeting, your team members are going to, or whoever is involved in the decision making that needs to have the conflict resolute, right? Needs to come to a resolute decision, that they're going to present, and then they're going to advocate for their position. They're going to hear, this is what I think, and here's why I think it, and here are the resources as to the information I found if you want to dig deeper. But typically in a meeting, you're just going to talk about, here's what I think about the situation, and here's why. And if the background information needs to be looked into, it can be, but typically in a meeting, the background information is something that is explored afterwards by the leader or the people making the final decision, if need be. So the gatekeeper is going to make sure, just like you would if everyone was in the office and sitting around a table and taking turns during their presentation, you as the facilitator or whoever's facilitating the meeting as the host will give controls over to that person. They'll do their presentation. The conscious will keep the person on track, and the timekeeper will make sure that the person isn't going over their allotted time. So once all the positions are presented, there's going to be an idea exchange. This is typically now everyone talking and discussing it as a group, and it's going to come up with a set of uncertain outcomes. There will be more than one outcome. This is where brainstorming and ideators and creativity and innovation come into play, because you want to come up with and explore all the possible areas that a decision or a solution could come from. And in there, inevitably, if you have a good team, and I'm sure that you do, the right answer will be there. And it's highly probable it will be a little of each person's input. One of the things that you need to watch out for or look for as leader when that discussion is happening is something that's called epistemic curiosity. And this is another word for that is everybody actually involved? Does everybody on the team care? Is there anyone in the meeting that you observe who is not interested or seems to be disconnected? If your entire team is not, or the people that are at least needing to make the decision are not involved, actively involved, visibly involved, verbally involved in this process, after the meeting, you need to pull them aside and ask them why, ask them what was happening, why You seemed like you were disengaged during the meeting. What was going on? And this is part of, if you are in the human resources framework leader, which is one of the 4 frameworks, Bowman's frameworks we're going to talk about, this would just be second nature to you. You would want to find out why. Um, but it's not second nature to all of us. Some of us would just look at the video screen, see someone who's not necessarily engaged, and maybe not do anything about it. Maybe we're just going to assume they didn't have much to say. Maybe that person is just having a difficult day, or they're not feeling well, and they had a lot to say. Maybe they had the one item that would have solved the entire problem. You got to follow up on that and find out why they weren't engaged, because they should have a natural curiosity and want to be involved in the process. Last but not least, once you get done discussing all of the ideas, you're going to rethink which ideas would actually work and come up with maybe 3 that are viable, and see how you can synthesize those with the organizational goals to see if they can actually be implemented or not. And there's your framework. It's pretty simple. It's pretty easy to explain. And it certainly is easy to follow in regard to having a meeting that is 100% around making decisions and conflict resolution, even in a remote video chat format. So having 2 processes, formal or informal, and a blend, of course, in between. Formal processes are really used for very important and difficult, complex decisions. As we talked about, you got to gather information from all of your team members, and make sure that those team members are giving you the best information that they possibly can, and decide by consensus. It has been statistically proven that when a team or a group makes a decision by consensus, they make the highest quality, most accurate, and most profitable decisions possible. However, making a team consensus also takes the most amount of work and the most amount of time. So you want to make sure that you're only using consensus for the most important critical success factors critical success factor type decisions for your group and for your organization. When you need an informal process, it's just a less significant conflict. Maybe it's just 2 people that aren't getting along. That's really more of a coaching aspect in regard to human interaction and team member interaction that you've got to coach your team members through. But when it comes to decision making, and it's a minor decision or conflict resolution regarding decision making, handle it as you would in the office. If it's coaching opportunity, coach your people, right? If it's something that is a minor decision that needs to be made, and 2 of your managers or 2 of your people can't decide, it's okay to decide by individualistic process, which basically means the leader rules. There's, depending on the degree of significance of your decision, there are different degrees between the leader making the decision versus consensus that you can employ along the way. But I will just leave you with a note. It is statistically proven that a leader who makes a decision by themselves, it is statistically proven that they make the least reliable and worst decisions of all decisions that are made. So if you happen to be a leader who chooses not to involve or enter into a process of conflict or controversy or decision making, just remember that the probability of you making the wrong decision is extremely high if you choose to make that decision on your own. The best course of action is to engage those that you've entrusted to be on your team, your peers, and your superior, and even a 365-degree view of the situation, so that you can get a well-rounded view of those that see things that you may not see and see from a different perspective, and then make a judgment based on that as a leader. And then you're going to make some good, sound decisions. Still not usually as good as consensus, but you're going to be 80% as good as consensus. So what are some of the leadership steps that you take in resolving conflict, especially in resolving remote team conflict? First off, be prepared for dissent. Dissent's not a bad thing. Dissent is going to happen in every situation. It's just like the world will never be without conflict because every individual human has their own view and their own thoughts. And as long as they're going to express those views and those thoughts, we're going to have controversies. We just need to know how to deal with them constructively. Dissent is a little different. Dissent is what happens after when a decision is made. Dissenting employees do not agree with the decision. That is not consensus. Consensus means that the entire team has come together. They've gone through the process that I've just shared, and the entire team truly agrees that the decision that the team is making is the best course of action to move forward, right? Now, even in consensus, you might not agree with every single point or 100%. But if you're a dissenting employee, what that means is that you do not agree with the group at all, just as a Supreme Court justice may dissent from the agreement that is reached by the majority of the judges on the Supreme Court. And the ones who disagree with the agreement of the majority literally write what's called a dissenting opinion. As a leader, you've got to expect that that's going to happen and plan for it, look for it, because if you allow dissenting employees to continue to work on the project, what's going to happen is they're unknowingly, they're not necessarily going to do it on purpose. So don't think to do it on purpose or that they have a bad intent. Psychologically, because they don't agree, they're going to not work, as Simon Sinek says, with blood, sweat, and tears towards the project. They're going to work towards a project, but you're not going to get 100% out of them. And so that is something, again, that is a coaching opportunity. We'll be holding coaching sessions on how to coach your employees through some of these things in coming weeks. So I hope that you would join in with those. But I do take my coaching skills from Harvard Business Schools. I had an opportunity to attend Harvard Business Schools or Harvard Business School Publishing Mentor Manager, and the material and the techniques and strategies for coaching employees are second to none. And I'll share some of the things that I learned there, as well as from practice at work. You need to balance inquiry and advocacy, and this is really simple. Think as yourself as a parent, or if you hopefully have siblings when you were young. Did your mom or your parents or your dad obviously have a favorite, right? When you're at work, you've got to be cognizant that there are just some people that you're going to click with. The rule is 25% of people you're just going to like. 25% of people you're not going to like. And 50% of the people you're going to like or dislike based on your experience with them. And that's true whether you're on a team, a teammate, a manager, or a leader. And so keep that in mind, because you cannot show favoritism and by the way of advocacy of your A-team player or your favorite person on your team and show favoritism towards their ideas. You will shut down creativity and idea sharing on your team quicker than anything by showing favoritism towards any one of your team members. So make sure you don't do that. When you are talking about the situation, make sure that you do it in a neutral way without emotions. State the facts. Here are the facts. Here's the situation we're in. Here is where we want to go. So you provide them a starting point, describe the situations and the facts that are involved, and a destination point, the direction that you need to go in. And do it in a neutral way without emotions. Emotional intelligence and emotional leakage are incredibly important to control and to know when it comes to remote team management. State your opinion and your observations. That's fine. Make sure that your team knows why you have the opinion that you have. That goes along with the next point as far as communicate your thoughts behind your opinion. And if it's helpful, share your experiences from the past. If you have had experience in a particular situation, it's great to share that. Helps give others, some wisdom to base that on. And of course, encourage everyone to share. Now, again, when you're encouraging everyone to share and you're in a remote meeting, remember that you should have assigned someone to be the gatekeeper, and that gatekeeper makes sure that everyone is sharing. And also remember that your conscience, for instance, you might ask your conscience to make sure that you're not showing favoritism to a particular person or a particular idea. Make sure that you try to be as unbiased as you can during the decision-making or conflict resolution process. So a little about the process in regards to engaging in creative problem solving. Creative problem solving typically has four major steps. The first one's clarification, and then you come up with ideas. There's a transformation of those ideas into things that will actually work, and then there's an implementation stage. And the screen that we have up in front of us just kind of rolls through that process and how that works. Now, this is not a creative problem solving session. So what I'm going to do is we're going to move forward, because what I want to do is talk about one of the benefits so that you understand how important it is to engage in it. But I also want to talk about some tools, how to make sure that you identify your orientation towards it, your teammates' orientations towards it, so that you get the right people in the right bus, and you'll understand that in just a minute. But first, let's just discuss real quick a little bit about the benefits of creative problem solving. First off, it facilitates team decision making, which then also facilitates conflict controversy resolution. It promotes idea development, being open-minded, innovation, creative, helps us be mindful towards our teammates. It is certainly part of brainstorming, and when you're doing any kind of decision-making or conflict resolution, alternate options are absolutely critical in finding a peaceful resolution and setting goals for moving forward. It prevents what's called groupthink. Groupthink happens when a group of people or executives or team members has a closed system mindset. They don't engage and ask or look outside their little group for input or information. They just make a decision based on the knowledge that they have currently, and it makes some of the worst decisions ever made. And when an organization enters into, or a team enters into groupthink, they typically fail, or at least their projects fail. Second to that, and very similar to that, is what's called team blindness or corporate blindness. Now, corporate blindness happens when a corporation has a culture, or you build a team culture that not only shuts out outside input and getting information from other sources, but it literally creates such a strict set of boundaries and processes that it's like putting blinders on a horse. And so your blinders that are on the horse prevent the horse from looking left and right and being able to see what's coming from the side. Well, what if a train's coming and I can't see the train because I've got blinders on, and I go to cross the tracks as a horse in a buggy? I'm going to die, right? Well, this is what happens when corporate leaders make their structures too tight. You want to widen up your structures for your teams to make sure that your teams are empowered, the positive people management, and creative and innovative processes like creative problem solving, so that they take in the things that are around them when it comes to decision making, including changes in society, changes in technology. And I can tell you a lot of stories about tech companies who went belly up because they did not look to see what other technologies were being developed, and they dumped hundreds of millions of dollars. There used to be a phone company, and those of you that are old enough to remember them, they were yellow. They kind of worked like walkie-talkies, and it was, well, they might have been called Nextel. Well, that technology and the owners and scientists that invested in that launched a series of satellites at the cost of hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. And they were so close-minded, they completely ignored the fact that cellular technology was being developed and being rolled out. Well, the moment they put those satellites into outer space, cellular systems had already been launched, and the satellites were absolutely worthless, and the company had to sell. And as we know, Nextel is really nowhere in the cell phone market today, but the companies that went cellular own the world in regard to phone service. That's corporate blindness. CPS breaks down barriers, and obviously it helps solve problems as a team. So what are some of the tools? One of the tools, in the first place that I would start, is to find out as a leader, what framework are you oriented towards? I highly recommend getting this book and reading it. I've read it. It's absolutely amazing. I found out all kinds of stuff about myself as a leader. Matter of fact, some of the leaders like marketplace vice presidents and senior vice presidents that I worked for, I guarantee you they wish that I had read this book when I worked for them, because I did have blind spots. Wow, a leader having blind spots? Does that happen? Of course it happens. We all have blind spots. And unfortunately, as we grow and we mature as leaders, we realize the blind spots that we have. And if we're become humble, the higher we go, we should become more humble. The more willing we are to admit where we were blind and the mistakes that we did make. But the four structural framework, or the four leadership frameworks, are structural, political, human resources, and symbolic. I've provided a link there. What's great about this, the assessment is 100% free. Once you take that assessment, it will score you and how strong you are in these areas. Idealistically, you should be equal if you can, or strong in all of them. And that only comes through purposeful study and self-learning. And so I recommend that you take the leadership orientation assessment and then get the book to find out how to strengthen your strengths and shore up your weaknesses. The next one is for you and your team, and this is a creativity index. And basically what your creativity index does is it grades you in 8 areas of creativity. Abstract thinking, connection, like can you connect dots of different things and build something out of them. Perspective, can you look at things from different perspectives? How curious you are, how bold you are, and you don't have to be an extrovert to be bold. Just watch the latest movie Midway, and the guy who probably saved Hawaii and West Coast from eventual invasion was a very introverted, incredibly smart, genius guy who was bold enough to stand up and say what he knew about what the intelligence was saying about the probable attack coming. And then there was complexity, how well you deal with complex problems, and then your persistence level. And if you take a look, this is the first time I took this before I started learning what I know about leadership and going higher from an expert achiever levels to individualistic and strategic leadership levels on leadership maturity framework, I took this test and I scored very well. The average score is about a 64%, and I scored overall 82, which was very good. It means I'm a creative, innovative leader, which I I should be. That's my doctoral studies in, right? But where I fell short was on my perspective, and this really shocked me. Is I kind of prided myself on the thought that I listened to other people's perspective, and I will tell you that over the last 4 years, I've done a lot of growth. And I've found out that due to my success as being an expert in my field, as well as being a team builder as an achiever and having highly successful teams, I had kind of closed myself off to um, people such as like marketplace vice president's input into my professional development. If I didn't, value their opinion like I should, and I didn't value their opinion like I should have. And this area in particular was an area that, sure enough, when I took the test, showed that I really needed to grow in. And since then, I have greatly throttled myself back on my boldness and my curiosity. I'm still highly curious, but I've throttled my boldness so that we would say that modifies or mitigates it, so that I don't overrun the curiosity of other people, so that I can hear what people are saying. So I talk far less now in these situations, and I listen far more often. And as each of you and your team members take this test, it will identify the areas in which they can increase in it. Yes, this test is free. I provided a link for it as well. And there again, there is a self-development book that goes with it, so that you can actually read the book and build on your strengths and sharp your weaknesses. It's an absolute must for remote team management and conflict resolution and creative problem solving. And the last one is conflict resolution tools. The last one is the Foresight Creative Model. The Foresight Creative Model was created by a behavioral scientist at Buffalo State University. Matter of fact, he's actually one of the scientists and professors that I have had the pleasure of sitting underneath and being taught by. He's part of my doctoral program. And companies like IBM, Zappos, Amazon, British Airways, just name any big creative type of company. Many of them, many use this as their formal assessment process for their teams. And it identifies the way that people think creatively, and it's incredibly important when you talk about decision making and fulfilling your company goals and making your projects that you're working on have successful outcomes. And there's 4 levels. It's a clarifier, and a clarifier, remember, is in that first stage of conflict resolution and decision making. The clarifier is one that says, what are we really talking about? What really is the problem, right? And there are people that's the way that they think. Well, when you're in the first stages of conflict resolution or decision making, you want to have your clarifier lead that part of the process. And if you have sub-teams, you want to have the clarifier lead the sub-team that's working on that part. The next one is your ideator. The ideator is the one that comes with all the cool, crazy, and sometimes harebrained schemes or ideas on how to solve the problem. This is the sticky note person, right? The brainstorming situation, and all the ideas come up, and you've got to come up with all these different ideas and things, and that's the ideator. So when you're in the brainstorming and looking at the different and ideas that are possible, you want your ideators active, and you want them leading that part of the process. The next one is your developer. Your developers are the ones that takes all those crazy ideas and whittles them down and says, hey, we got, out of the 20 you presented, we have 3 that are viable. And what we're going to do is we're going to take these 3 and we're going to actually make sure that we get it right. Because whatever we present to our peers, to the senior vice president, to those below us, to our customers, if we're selling to our customers, whatever we present has got to be right and it's got to work. That's who your developers are, and it identifies those people that think that way, and you can put the right person in charge of that part of the process. Finally, there's an implementer, and they're the ones that get the job done. They're the ones who like to roll out. If you're in marketing, these are the ones who like to do the product launches. They're the ones who roll everything out. And then there's a final category, which is what I'm in, and that is called an integrator. And frankly, when I first take this test, I was high on the ideation side. And since I've grown and matured on that leadership maturity level, I'm actually equal. I literally score a 34 out of 50 in all 4 of these areas. And that simply means that I fit firmly and squarely on that level of a strategist, because it allows me as a strategist to actually see all 4 of these areas and how to take things that are in chaos and create order from them. And that's when you begin to come into the place where executive leader, higher level leadership, being able to deal with complex adaptive systems, open system thinking, and you can run teams of teams. And I just encourage everyone to take this test. You can get certified in it, to give it to your own team. To get certified in it is $2,500. You can call any certified coach, Foresight Creative Coach, and they could administer the test to your team for whatever they charge. I will put a free outline that goes over the whole Foresight Creative model up on our shared folder, so you'll know a little bit more about it. But it is based in science, and it's based in human behavioral studies, and it's incredibly accurate. So I really hope you look into it and use it. The last thing we wanted to look at were some things and some pitfalls to avoid, and then we'll adjourn. So keep in mind that set your expectations to be real or realistic. We talked about having SMART goals in our leadership, team leadership series. Your expectations should be SMART as well. Don't infer feelings. Don't infer that someone is feeling a particular way. Ask them how they're feeling. Clarify how they're feeling. Don't assume anything, because you know that what that makes out of you and I. Failing to listen is a huge problem in conflict resolution. People know that you care because you're paying attention and listening. If you're not paying attention and listening, and your body language shows it, you will put a wall between you and your teammates, or you and other leaders. Failing to praise. No one's ideas are stupid. Make sure that you praise your folks for the things that they're doing well, for the ideas that they're bringing to the table, and for the fact that they want to come to a decision and to be successful. And finally, a pitfall to avoid is failing to model the desirable behaviors that you want to see in your team. So you need to make sure that you're practicing what you preach, walking the walk, not just talking the talk. So I appreciate everyone in joining in today. We're just before the hour, and I just want to ask everyone, if you would, feel free to contact me at gregory.bushman@gmail.com with your questions, comments. Hopefully you'll look on my website, www.gregbushman.com, and for future events. They're on the front page. Just give it a moment to load. Networks are slow right now, but you will see all the events on the front page, and we can continue our conversation. And if you need customized individualized help, I'm always available as a OD practitioner to come or hold a remote meeting with your organization to engage in any form of coaching or intervention that you might need. Thanks and have a great day.